Hello, and welcome to another edition of You Have to Ask the Question. Eruvin. Eruvs. Wow. So, a friend of mine recently finished Masechtas Eruvin, and he made a siyum on, and it got me thinking that there's some questions that just need to be asked about Eruvs. Many of us ask, is the Eruv or Eruv down or Eruv kosher? Who do you hold by this Eruv? And there's plenty of classic jokes that go that way. However, there is a very interesting point that should be thought about. And the question, I believe, falls under, you have to ask the question. There are different types of Eruv, and they all seem to share a certain characteristic. An Eruv, for example, is an Eruv Hotzah, which is the most commonly known Eruv, is the one that allows us to carry in a more public domain on Shabbos. There's an Eruv Chatzeris, which allows people who share a courtyard to carry within that courtyard. There is an Eruv Techum, which is a Jew is only allowed to travel outside of the city 2,000 amos, and in order to extend that, they can place an Eruv at the end of the 2,000 in order to give them an additional 2,000 amos distance to walk. Otherwise, you cannot go. It's usher, it's prohibited to go outside of that domain. And finally, there's something called an Eruv Tavshila that many of us make when Yontif and Shabbos fall next to each other, Yontif being first, and therefore it allows us to prepare on Yontif for Shabbos. However, an interesting thing that Eruvs all share is that they have a large number of laws that are imaginary. The things that seem to be making up that we now deal with as truths, and we deal with them that they have a certain level of reality, and then and therefore it affects an actual change. However, they're sort of like illusionary. What do I mean, for example? Is that if you have, nobody is really going to say that two strings on a pole, two poles with a string carrying across on top is a doorway or a wall. It does not, in nobody's imagination, there is a real wall there. You would ask 100 people, and 100 people say, do you see a wall? And none of us say it's a wall. However, not only do we, because of Shabbos, say there is a wall there, and it now encircles this entire domain, it'll allow us to carry from our individual domains into a public domain without the threat of being over an Avera Deraisa, an Issa Deraisa, and therefore, subsequently, if a person does that on purpose, can be Chayiv Misa, capital punishment. A capital crime is being prevented by this so-called setup. For example, a person who has something within somebody who realizes they're in a place without a Eruv like this, they're not allowed to carry 4 amos, 4 amos, which is approximately 6 to 8 feet. However, within those 6 to 8 feet, it is deemed their own personal rishus, own personal space, and therefore, if they carry only 2 amos within it, they have not transgressed. However, if they travel 4.1 amos or 4.2 amos, they are now transgressing another mitzvah deraisa from leaving their personal space back into the public domain. So therefore, but there is really, where did this personal space create? And there are many halachas that, as anybody who studied Eruvin will see, there are similar laws like that. We find another scenario where the Torah also gives a bunch of illusionary dimensions and gives it physicality. And that would be with the mitzvah of sukkah. Anybody who studied or built a sukkah knows that there are many different laws of certain types of walls that you can build that will constitute a sukkah. There are certain types of sach which tend to use the imagination to a great extent. So seeing that these two mitzvahs are two issues in the Torah that talk about, using these type of imaginary type of walls or structures and giving them reality to the extent that if you build a structure using any of these so-called walls, it gives you a mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah, even though to all appearances doesn't look like there's walls there, and it's and you're not sitting inside this hut. You're sitting inside this weird structure. Nevertheless, you're fulfilling the mitzvah in the Torah of sitting in the sukkah, and therefore you're creating a merit for yourself that will last for eternality. Same thing is true by Eruv. By building an Eruv, surrounding yourself in Eruv, you're preventing yourself from transgressing serious errors. However, to all apparent purposes, you don't see there's no physicality to these so-called physical structures. So the question must be asked, why? Why is these laws so steeped in the illusionary and in the imaginary? Okay, and it's possible to say, to look at it and see the following thing. It could be that when we talk about Eruv, we're dealing with the mitzvah of Shabbos. Shabbos is tantamount to a taste of Olam Haba. We use the expression and we understand and we feel that we're in, so to speak, God's domain of Me'ein Olam Haba. This is a taste of being immersed yourself. The Kedusha of Shabbos permeates through our lives, or should permeate in our life, where we create this atmosphere around us that we're in an Olam Haba kind of state. And once you're in an Olam Haba kind of state, and you realize that there is no boundaries, there is no physicality, there is just us and Hashem, then a string on two poles is a wall. Because the same way Hashem says, Vehi erev vehi boker yom echad, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'asaros, and created the actual physicality of something, there's a reality to, in the spiritual sense, of what we deem our relationship, our connection to God. So therefore, they can create that reality, so much so that it can prevent a capital punishment, because we extracted this Eruv, or any other type of Eruv. Same thing what we said in the going from 2000 amos further. And all these things, you can find the same apply to this idea that once we're in God's name. And similarly by Sukkah, it's the same thing. The Sukkah, as many commentaries explain, is also a taste of Gan Eden. It's a taste of the world before sin. It's a taste of where we should have been on that next level, where the world was there to totally serve man, and therefore to allow us to get closer to Hashem. And therefore, if we build this structure and we're creating this environment within the sukkah, and there are many proofs, which I'm not going to delve into now, to this kind of concept that the sukkah constitutes this Olam Haba setting, we also now have the same understanding that why these imaginary walls, or bent walls, or schach where there is no schach and all that, or under three tefachim constitutes connection to the floor, is because we're creating this Olam Haba world. In an Olam Haba world, the physicality and the spirituality are intermeshed, are closer together, and the distinguishing factors is because at the end of the day we realize we're all in one place, Hashem's makom. Hashem permeates the entire world. If we look at the mitzvah of Eruv, if we understand that we're creating a world where there is no separation between the physicality and the spirituality, then we have an opportunity to be nena, to get benefit, to get connection to the Shekhinah. Same thing with the mitzvah sukkah. We should be zocha to think, and it's not just we're playing make-believe, it's reality. So much so that in a place without an Eruv, if somebody carries from their house to a public domain, and two witnesses will warn that person prior to that, and they carry something, he will transgress and he can get a capital punishment. Creates the reality. And therefore, we should be zoch to understand that there is only one true reality, the reality of Hashem's world, how Hashem permeates everything. Have a wonderful Shabbos.